Hope you enjoyed last week's podcast, our birthday edition. I think it showed how far Poetry P has come in the years since 2017. Back in 2017, haiku was very new to me, at least contemporary haiku was. And coincidentally, this week we're going to continue the series about Tanka, which is something I know about, but I've not written regularly, and certainly never tried to have any of my efforts published. Many of you are in the same boat. Either you've never tried it, or you're very new to the form, and according to some emails I've had, you are a little fearful to try it and to share those early efforts with us. But remember, this is going to be new for very many of us. Thankfully, we have Vandana Parashar, a modern marvel in general, and specifically an expert in the genre. She's going to be mentoring me and the editing team this month, which actually might come as a bit of a surprise to her. So in case you were wondering, I'm Patricia, and this is the Poetry P podcast. This week, having looked at history and examples of Tanka through the ages, we're going to start looking at contemporary Tanka, its form, how to write it, and I'm going to read you some examples. But before we get cracking, I have to say a big, big thank you to Vandana, who generously shared with me a slide deck she had put together about contemporary Tanka. I've used it as my guide, but I've manipulated it a bit, adding a few poems to illustrate my points and to supplement those you'll hear at the end, which Vandana chose. By the end of the presentation, you should have a good grasp of contemporary Tanka. If you've not written them before, you'll have a guide as to how to go about it. And of course, you'll know what we're expecting from you in the November call out. And perhaps I should warn you that we're going to hear poetry about difficult topics: politics, death, and illness, to name a few. You can listen along with me, or you can watch me present this, complete with slides, on the Poetry P YouTube channel. If you're over there and you haven't subscribed, please do. It's something that's free to use. There will be some links in the show notes, but those of you who are ISA or Buson members will of course find the slides plopping into your mailbox. No sound of water. Surely that makes it worth thinking about taking out a membership to support the podcast. But if you can't do that, perhaps you can buy us a coffee now and again. And you can do that on Buy Me a Coffee. So shall we go and have a look and a listen to contemporary Tanka? Come on. What makes for a good Tanka? Well, Vandana tells me Tanka blends traditional elements with modern sensibilities, which we'll see in a little while. And while contemporary poets usually take liberties with this structure, some feel that maintaining the form can provide a rhythmic foundation. And rhythm, as you know, is something I talk about quite a bit. Like haiku, brevity is favoured while writing Tanka. Perhaps rather than brevity, we can think of it as being a succinct form. As we know from previous podcasts, a traditional Tanka is something we in the West describe in terms of 31 syllables and is usually written in the form of 5-7-5-7-7. But of course, we're talking contemporary Tanka here, so we're not going to be counting syllables. But for the most part, perhaps we will replace that syllable count with a pattern structure. So we're looking at lines in terms of short, long, long, but not always, of which more later. Let's hear the first of our poems. I refuse to lose the flame of my single space This safety I choose between your fist and my face, between my gender and my race. I refuse to lose the flame of my single space. This safety I choose between your fist and my face, between my gender and race. And that's by June Jordan, On Time Tanka, the essential June Jordan. And you might notice, because it's very unusual for Tanka, that June has rhymed this Tanka. Ooh. As you'll know if you've been following the series of podcasts on Tanka, Tanka were traditionally love poems. And that's the first of the themes I'd like to illustrate. Poppies in bloom, bring back to memory those lips I kissed while lying in an attic lit up with the evening sun. Poppies in bloom, bring back to memory those lips I kissed while lying in an attic lit up with the evening sun. That's Yosano Tekan, translated by Makoto Ueda from his book Modern Japanese Tanka, an anthology. Until age 30, I'm going to take a stroll. Your words make me wonder what part of your scenery I am. Until age 30, I'm going to take a stroll. Your words make me wonder what part of your scenery I am. Tawara Machi, again translated by Makoto Ueda from his book Modern Japanese Tanka, an anthology. That summer, long before we knew which of us would not be here to look back. That summer, long before we knew which of us would not be here to look back. Alison Williams, from Presence, issue 71 in 2021. The next theme I'd like to illustrate is the observation of life, akin to the idea of sketches of life that Shiki brought to both haiku and to Tanka. In the vase, a plume of wisteria, hanging too short to reach the tatami floor. In the vase, a plume of wisteria, hanging too short to reach the tatami floor. Masaoka Shiki, translated by Makoto Ueda from Modern Japanese Tanka, an anthology. Across the valley, many paths lead to the peaks. I am a watchman who listens to the stillness of life unfolding. Across the valley, many paths lead to the peaks. I am a watchman who listens to the stillness of life unfolding. Alfred Booth, Presence, issue 79, 2024. An acacia tree uprooted from the side road. The years it takes for a boy to become a parent of his child. An acacia tree uprooted from the side road. The years it takes for a boy to become a parent of his child. Lakshmi Iyer, Presence, issue 79, 2024. Train to the city. Graffiti and slashed seats. A girl's name on the cloudy glass inside a crudely drawn heart. Train to the city. Graffiti and slashed seats. A girl's name on the cloudy glass inside a crudely drawn heart. Margaret Owen Ruckert, Presence, issue 79, 2024. The next of the themes I'd like to think about is social commentary. You know, I've learnt so much from reading this type of Senryu and Tanka from days gone by. And it makes me wonder what you're going to write about. Here are a few to get your juices flowing. Soldiers on the ground, swept with gunfire from the air, again and again. Through the entire sequence, the audience sits in silence. Soldiers on the ground, swept with gunfire from the air, again and again. Through the entire sequence, the audience sits in silence. Kondo Yoshimi, translated by Makoto Ueda from Modern Japanese Tanka, an anthology. Fallen leaves crunch beneath our feet, unnumbered, the years and lives before colonization. Fallen leaves crunch beneath our feet, unnumbered, the years and lives before colonization. Julie Thorndike, Ribbons, Volume 15, Number 3, 2019. COVID or not, I keep my distance like a pigeon dragging a slice of bread away from the flock. COVID or not, I keep my distance like a pigeon dragging a slice of bread away from the flock. Jackie Chow, Presence, issue 79, 2024. I think that one would be very interesting to historians and maybe psychologists in the future. Perhaps hand in hand with social commentary, we have political thought. It's hazardous to live in Japan and say in the language of the Japanese people what's on my mind. It's hazardous to live in Japan and say in the language of the Japanese people what's on my mind. Toki Zenmaro, translated by Makoto Ueda from Modern Japanese Tanka, an anthology. Given that Tanka are more emotional, more lyrical than haiku, the next theme, death, is a strong theme to write about. But we have to be careful, of course, when we're writing about death, not to be too overly sentimental. And here I have a poem by Yosano Takan, written about his daughter who died 6 weeks after her birth. And I think he's got a balanced approach, as Vandana might say, to the subject. In the dark woods, lying ahead on your road, whom will you call? You don't yet know the names of your parents or your own. In the dark woods, lying ahead on your road, whom will you call? You don't yet know the names of your parents or your own. And I know many of us came to poetry because of illness. You all know that that was the case with me. Perhaps that's a subject you'd like to write about and share with us. Here we have Nakajo Fumiko, writing whilst being treated for cancer. Something, not surprisingly, she found extremely hard to deal with. In search of a shore where I might spot my breast drifting along with white jellyfish, I'll go to sleep again. In search of a shore where I might spot my breast drifting along with white jellyfish, I'll go to sleep again. Nakajo Fumiko, translated by Makoto Ueda. From Modern Japanese Tanka, an anthology. Now, whilst you don't need to use a kigo, you can still write about natural beauty and nature. The earth looks like one magnificent lotus flower as the sun rises over the snowscape. The earth looks like one magnificent lotus flower as the sun rises over the snowscape. And that's by Yosano Akiko, translated by Makoto Ueda from Modern Japanese Tanka, an anthology. And Akiko was Tekan's wife. But we're going to hear more about her on another podcast. Searching for a home other than in your own heart is perilous. Must we always keep our suitcase packed? Searching for a home other than in your own heart is perilous. Must we always keep our suitcase packed? Naomi Beth Wakan, From the Way of Tanka, 2017. In exile, we make myths of our homeland, poised uncertain between assimilation and return. In exile, we make myths of our homeland, poised uncertain between assimilation and return. Naomi Beth Wakan, From the Way of Tanka, 2017. The next few themes, to me, have the potential for you to give vent to your emotions. Personal feelings, passion, and relationships. Have a listen. This one, I think, falls into the category of personal feelings. From the water's depth, my face in the present world looks up at me. What loneliness awaits me in the world to come? From the water's depth, my face in the present world looks up at me. What loneliness awaits me in the world to come? Shaku Kocho, translated by Makoto Ueda from Modern Japanese Tanka, an anthology. And I don't know about you, but I can feel the passion when I read this one. Should I stroke it, sparks will shoot up and scatter from her black hair that coils around my body and keeps me tightly bound. Should I stroke it, sparks will shoot up and scatter from her black hair that coils around my body and keeps me tightly bound. Morai Ogai, translated by Makoto Ueda from Modern Japanese Tanka, an anthology. And now for those sometimes difficult things, relationships. I strain out every pip making raspberry jam. The tedium, listening to you censure my blunder. I strain out every pip making raspberry jam. The tedium, listening to you censure my blunder. Marilyn Humbert, from Presence, issue 71, 2021. Watching the waves wash away my sandcastle, I tell him, I am not ready to be a mum. Watching the waves wash away my sand castle, I tell him, I am not ready to be a mum. And that's by Vandana Parashar from Presence 71, 2021. I told you she was good, didn't I? So now what else can we say about Tanka? As with haiku, Tanka often leaves space for interpretation, inviting our reader to find their own meaning and connections. Unlike haiku, which use imagery for poetic effect, Tanka are more lyrical and expressive of emotion. These emotions are expressed a number of ways and do not preclude the use of imagery as a technique, as you've heard in the poems I've read to you so far. I've already mentioned to you that Tanka should be succinct. Every word, much as in our haiku, carries weight. That means the form is demanding. It demands that we as poets choose our words carefully, ensuring that every word is the right one, in the right place, carrying the right rhythm. Clear and precise language enhances the poem's impact. What about juxtaposition and the idea of link and shift? I can almost hear you asking it from here. Well, juxtaposition, link and shift, although often used, are not prerequisites. You've heard that from some of the poems I've already read. However, Tanka often juxtaposes contrasting images or ideas, which helps to create that poetic tension. So, if you're going to juxtapose or link and shift, how do you go about it? And this might be a good time to say to you, Tanka don't require a cutting word. It's probably something we should look at more closely, but for now, we'll just leave it at that. So, to get back to the point, usually the divide is between the third and fourth line and introduces a shift in perspective or a surprising element, adding depth and complexity. But here's a little reveal. It is rare, but not unheard of, that the divide comes between the second and third line. In this case, the form takes the shape of long, long, short, long, short. Shall we hear some of them? Among the hundreds of tubercular patients, I see one all gaunt with age, my former love. Among the hundreds of tubercular patients, I see one all gaunt with age, my former love. Shaku Kochu from Modern Japanese Tanka, an anthology. Spring moves into summer. Mum remembers me today. I keep a steady voice to say, I love you. Spring moves into summer. Mum remembers me today. I keep a steady voice to say, I love you. Caroline Quentin Hicks from Blithe Spirit, Volume 34, Number 3. So now I've spoken about rhythm. I've spoken a lot about rhythm in my time. But remember I said that originally the tanka, or waka as they were known in pre-modern times, were love poems. Well, that's true. But also, they began life as songs way back when, hence the rhythm. Read your Tanka aloud. If you're so inclined, sing it. It should have a natural rhythm and flow, even though it's a short poem. The arrangement of syllables should feel harmonious. And you know, I'm a great believer in reading aloud. If you do that honestly, you can really tell whether you've achieved that harmony and flow. So to recap, while rooted in tradition, contemporary Tanka can explore current issues, socially relevant causes, personal experiences, and modern life. And for the sake of our submission period in November 2024, these are the suggested themes to write about: love, death, relationships, social and political commentary, observations of life, natural beauty and nature, thoughts of home, personal feelings, passion, and maybe illness, if you care to share with us. Also this time, for this call out, although there are variations in the form, let's, for simplicity's sake, stick to the two forms I've illustrated. Those which take the form short, long, short, long, long, or long, long, short, short. You can juxtapose or link and shift if you want to. But remember, there's really no need for a cut. Unless, of course, it fits your poem. And one last reminder. Tanka are more lyrical than haiku. You can show much more emotional content in a tanka than you would in a haiku. But they are still succinct poems, so choose your words carefully. That's what poets do, don't we? Now, I have some poetry to finish off with, chosen by Vandana, mostly. From my hospital window, I see across a bare field in the morning rain a yellow silk umbrella on its solitary way. From my hospital window, I see across a bare field in the morning rain a yellow silk umbrella on its solitary way. Sanford Goldstein, the Tanka Society of America International Tanko Contest, 2003, in which it got first place, no less. A raven believed it could fly through me, unaware that I am glass, pretending to be sky. A raven believed it could fly through me, unaware that I am glass, pretending to be sky. Debbie Strange. San Francisco International Competition for Haiku, Senryu, and Tanka 2020, in which it got third place. It's a bit surreal, isn't it? But don't forget, that's one of the techniques we can use. I do have a commentary from one of the judges, Christine Villa, for this poem. It goes like this. This one-breath tanka is not only whimsical, but astonishing. The first three lines reveal a raven with magical traits, one who believed it could fly through a person. The tone of the tanka sounds fanciful until it pivots on the fourth line with the word unaware. Eventually, I hear glass shattering into pieces, and I feel a sudden twinge of pain as I read the revelation of the last line. Pretending to be sky. Sometimes I too like to pretend that I am carefree and invincible like the sky because it feels good. I even manage to convince others that I am such until I get hurt. And I'm reminded that I'm actually fragile, vulnerable, and destructible. It's a sad truth, and the poet has effectively conveyed this message in 5 lines. Not quite sure that I see it as Chrissy does, but then that's what it's all about, isn't it? As we've said, a good tanka will leave the interpretation open to your reader. Well done, Debbie. Just this, the chickadee in the pines singing, I am here, I am here. Just this, the chickadee in the pines singing, I am here, I am here. Elizabeth Black. Sanford Goldstein International Tanka Contest 2024, in which it got first place. We haven't seen this in the tanka that I've read today, that repetition of lines. We have heard it on previous tanka podcasts, where the first line was repeated in the second. But that is a technique that you could use when writing yours. Archaeological dig. Since your death, unearthing what's left of me, brush by tiny brush. Archaeological dig. Since your death, unearthing what's left of me, brush by tiny brush. Susan Birch. Haiku Poets of North California, 2020. Tanka. It got first place. And again, I have a commentary for you. I'll put a link in the show notes. Whenever someone dear to us dies, our world screeches to a halt and turns bleak. In this tanka, death is faced with hope. A resiliency to rise above adversity. The first line starts with an archaeological dig. It seems like a long stretch of history, but the poet is brave enough to unearth what's left of himself or herself. Who were they before they met? Before he took care of the loved one, or before his life was saddled with pain and grief? What is left of him after that? What is left behind? The last line, brush by tiny brush, reveals that he picks up the pieces just like an archaeologist uses a tiny brush to dust off loose dirt from artifacts. It serves as a metaphor for his careful and purposeful recollecting memories of the deceased loved one, of rediscovering himself, or of colouring his life anew. Or perhaps through creative art such as painting, he finds his new self. Because this tanka has a lot of dreaming room and utilizes fresh metaphors, it stands out. When the wind blows through holes in a bamboo, does it know my heart too was pierced with notes of our song? When the wind blows through the holes in a bamboo, does it know my heart too was pierced with notes of our song? Soraya Menon Roychaudhuri. Haiku Kata, Issue 3, January 2022. And it was the editor's choice. And as such, I have a commentary by Carla Ramesh to read to you. Carla wrote, "This richly layered tanka caught my attention on my very first reading, and my enjoyment of the poem has only been increasing with each reading. Waka, as the present-day tanka was once called, was traditionally known as a love song. I find strong traces of waka in this tanka, both in the lyricism and the intuitive construction, and in the lightness and suppleness of the lines. I'm also reminded of Akiko Yosana's tanka. Leaving something to the imagination, each time I reread this tanka, I realized anew how it's possible to convey more when you do not show everything at once. when the wind blows through holes in a bamboo. Simple and clear enough, and being an Indian, I've often listened to ragas played on the bansuri, which is an Indian bamboo flute. The next line stopped me in my tracks. Does it know? In Hindu philosophy, and more so in our cultural memory, the concept known as Advaita, non-duality, oneness of consciousness, is deeply entrenched. Yes, that blade of grass, that mountain, you and I, and the wind blowing through the bamboo are all one pulsating consciousness. Next we come to the lower verse, the poignant lines 4 and 5. My heart too was pierced with the notes of our song. These lines express the Japanese concept of yugen. Yugen is defined as a profound awareness of the universe that triggers a deep emotional response. Here it opens out to layers of interpretation. Is there a lover intended here? Or is the poet talking about the oneness in nature? Or does the disappointment of unrequited love lurk between the lines? Between what is said and not meant, and what is meant and not said, most of love is lost. Khalil Gibran. Tanka, the pundits say, convey only the middle of a story. The rest happens in the reader's mind. How well this has been handled here. This tanka can be a metaphor for life too, suggesting that nothing is irrevocably broken and that our lives remain entwined somehow. The residue of each person we meet is left behind, and from time to time, we are reminded of them. And it seemed fitting to end with this poem, with great thanks again to my guardian angel of Tanka, Vandana Parashar. Shrinking for him ever so slowly, he still can't find the space he needs. Shrinking for him ever so slowly, he still can't find the space he needs. Vandana Parashar, from Still We Rise, Wee Sparrow Press. Please let me know what you thought of this presentation. Have Vandana and I helped you to pick up your pens and write with a little bit more confidence? We do hope so. And we and the rest of the editing team look forward to reading your Tanka when the submission period opens in November. If it's your first time writing Tanka, don't worry, just take the plunge. There has to be a first time. What's the worst that can happen? But if you're coming late to the party and you've missed this opportunity, do have a wander over to our homepage and look at the drop down on the submissions tab to see what we're reading at the moment. Unless it's December, there's bound to be something. Many thanks for joining me today. It's been lovely to have your company. Do give me some feedback. And as we head towards the end of the year, if you have a burning desire to hear something next year, or if you have a book of short forms you think you'd like to read to us, get in touch. I'm at the planning stage as I speak. And join me next week for more poetry. Until then, keep writing. You might even be writing Tanka, I guess. So you'll find a few links in the show notes, including how to buy us a coffee and help us to continue bringing you this podcast and all the opportunities it offers you. Have a good week. Ciao.